Hi, listeners. You're about to hear a recording of our live debate from July 22nd, 2022, at the Pennsylvania Council of Teachers of Mathematics, PCTM, conference.
We were so excited to be live. We are thankful to PCTM for inviting us and hope to be invited to a conference near you soon.
And without further ado, here's the recording of the live debate.
Enjoy. We are so excited to host our first ever live debate. We have no idea how it's going to go. We don't want to waste a minute, so let's jump right into it. We're talking about homework. Should we give it? Doesn't matter. What's the purpose?
And so today we have two teams of two debating the resolution. Students should have math homework.
And again, before we begin, we would love your original votes, your original thoughts right now before you hear any arguments using the QR code there. Share with us your thought of, are you on the pro side or con side for the resolution students should have homework? Ooh. And as you cast your final initial votes here, I want to introduce our guests. So here debating for the resolution that students should have math homework, we have two wonderful educators. First up is Twitter loudmouth, teacher, consultant, and superstar, Shelby Strong. Hi, Shelby.
Hello.
Shelby, can you tell us quickly a little bit about yourself and your current role?
Absolutely. So, as he said, I'm Shelby Strong. I am a born and raised, Louisiana girl, and will be relocating at the end of the month to Massachusetts to join the Center for Mathematics Achievement at Lesley University.
And arguing along with her is education professor who teaches school mathematics and math pedagogy to pre-service teachers, Dr. Rachel Ayeko. Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
Can you tell us quickly a little bit about yourself and your current role?
Hello, everybody. My name is Rachel Ayeko, as you heard. I am born and raised in Kenya. I relocated to the United States to study and also to teach. And I'm excited to be with you. And we'll talk more. Thank you.
And then before we move on, the question we ask all of our guests on the podcast, and I'll start with you, Shelby. When did math first become controversial to you?
So math first became controversial to me in college when I realized that all of the questions that I'd been having since very early in elementary school actually had answers. So things like, why is it that we add two odd numbers together and the sum is even? Why is it that we multiply those two odd numbers and the product is odd? I had those questions and no one had answers for me until I got to college and discovered that someone did. And I was furious that no one had ever bothered telling me that math had a reason and a purpose and a logic before. It was just memorize things and follow them. So knowing that math had a logic to it.
Nice. And Rachel?
So as I told you, I thought that I was good in math when I moved here. And I worked in a project with one of my professors where we were looking at how pre-service teachers are learning how to teach fractions. And for me, what was beginning to become very challenging was the fact that we kept on drawing representations, especially when it came to multiplication and division. And it was so hard for me, and I'm asking myself, oh my goodness, I do not know how to do this. Why can't we just multiply the numerators and the denominators? Why are we drawing all these crazy things that are so difficult? And I felt vulnerable, I felt challenged, and I learned a lot. So that is when it started occurring to me, I am not as good as I think I am.
All right, thank you. And now we have a team of two arguing against the resolution. First up is a math educator, a dope human doing dope things, who recently completed a second master's in ed leadership at Columbia University, Crystal Watson. Crystal, can you tell everybody where you are and what you're doing right now?
Testing. Okay. I am in Cincinnati, Ohio. I am an instructional partner, better known as instructional coach, but I'm on a crusade to change that. Yeah, that's what you wanted to know, right? All right. Yay.
And arguing along with her is a dungeon master.
Oh, yeah.
Sandwich evangelist, numberjack, and also a dad. Justin Ian.
Woo!
Justin, could you let everybody know a little bit more about you?
I'm a veteran teacher, 15 years in the classroom, and violent advocate for students and education. Whether or not that has to destroy the education system in the process is fine with me.
Thanks, Justin. All right. So the question that we ask all of our guests is, when did math first become controversial to you? We're going to start with you, Crystal.
Like Shelby, it was college. When I figured out that there was math beyond algebra, I had no idea. In high school, I had a counselor that never even offered it to me. Never thought that I should, I guess, take it, or I deserved access to it. I can't speak for them now, but clearly they were a terrible human. So it became controversial for me when I figured out that not all have the same access to the beautiful world of mathematics that others do.
Thank you. And Justin, when did math first become controversial to you?
I will admit I am very late to this game. It took me several years into my career to realize that math was not the same for everybody. When students from different backgrounds were doing things in different ways that I did not understand and couldn't quite comprehend, and so had to tip that scale to understand why they were doing the things that they were doing and still being successful. And so I'm trying to make up for it now, doing my penance.
Thank you. And with that, let's get into the debate. And if you're familiar with our podcast, our debate goes in 3 rounds: opening statements, questions, and closing round. So we're beginning with the opening statements, and we'll go back and forth between each side. And we'll start with the pro side with Dr. Rachel Ayako. Rachel, you have 2 minutes, and your time begins now.
Now, as a mathematics educator, I always encourage my beginning teachers that giving students homework is essential. First, teachers must have a policy on why they assign homework and what constitutes homework. For every class that one teaches, you have unique students, and the cohort is always unique. Therefore, it is essential to first know who your students are and what knowledge gaps you identify when teaching them. This information can inform the range of homework you can assign to students. There are advantages in assigning homework, and these advantages include: it helps students to develop good study habits. Remember that we are trying to prepare our students to be independent learners when they go to college. So I'm assuming that we are all looking at the students as beginning to start preparing for college. It also helps students to realize that learning can occur at home. As I said, it fosters independent learning, and it helps students to develop responsible character traits. Finally, it gives parents an opportunity to actually see what their child is learning in school. So I believe that it is essential for students to get homework.
Thank you. And now we're going to hear from the opposing side. First up, the opposing side is Crystal Watson. Crystal, your 2 minutes begins now.
Thank you so much. Home time is not for extended practice. Home time, after being at school for 7.5 to 8 hours, is for our brains to rest, recharge, and spend time building community with family and friends. Our opponents will say that homework gives students time to practice out of class time. That's true for some students. What takes some 20 to 30 minutes to complete will take others much longer because all students do not possess the skills yet to practice alone. They will also say that meaningful homework makes a difference. I'm sure that's true as well for a subset of our student population, but are we looking to provide home practice experiences for all students, or just those that have the time and support to make homework time effective and meaningful? Active learning strategies are the big thing right now, like inquiry-based learning, and they've been shown to increase student achievement across race and socioeconomic lines. I'm asking, how does homework allow for active learning to take place at home? Research has shown that the amount of homework can harm and actually cause regression. Can anyone in the room pinpoint the exact amount of homework to give each and every child specifically to help and not harm? If not, is it really worth spitballing it during a time where we are already working so vigorously to accelerate learning? I don't think so.
Thank you. And back to the pro side, Shelby Strong. Shelby, your 2 minutes begins now.
As educators, we spend a lot of time living in the in-between, in the shades of gray, except for when it comes for things that we really feel strongly about, like testing and homework. Homework is something that a lot of us experienced and have a lot of negative connotations with, kind of like memorizing our math facts or how we define trapezoids. There are things that we believe to be settled when we were children that we get older and we realize there's room for nuance, there's room for shades of gray. And homework is no different. Just because homework has caused pain and has been harmful in the past doesn't mean it needs to be thrown away. It can be reimagined, it can be re-envisioned, and it can be done in a way that provides students an opportunity to discover what to do when you don't know what to do. If all we ever give students is the opportunity to practice when they are together, then we're robbing them of the opportunity to figure out how to find out for themselves what I need to do when I am on my own and I have a problem in front of me that needs solving.
All right, thank you. And last but not least, Justin I. Justin, your 2 minutes begins now.
Good morning. I would like to reiterate the point that my esteemed colleague made, specifically in terms of equity. The idea of homework is necessitated on an environment outside of the classroom that allows for that homework to be completed in a successful fashion, which many of our students simply do not have. Either they do not have the family support or the home environment in which to successfully complete those tasks, or they have other things that take priority, such as jobs or taking care of younger siblings or older relatives. Additionally, we have this issue of time. We already have our students in the building for 8 hours a day where we are stuffing information into their heads, molding them into the people that they want to be in the future. If in the course of those 8 hours in the building, we're not able to give them enough practice and enough information, then either we're giving them too much information or we're not doing it efficiently enough. And either way, that doesn't translate to forcing them to do that work outside of class. Along those same lines, as educators, we are keenly aware of how our work spills over from our work time into our home time. We spend hundreds and hundreds of hours a year at home grading and creating lessons and coming up with meaningful ways for our students to understand the content. This is our unpaid labor. By having students do homework, not only are we forcing them to do that unpaid labor, but we're also desensitizing them to accept that necessity as an employee later in life. Well, of course, I should take this work home with me. I have homework. I've been doing homework for my whole life. We talk very heavily about the importance of a healthy work-life balance, but we are not putting that into practice when we send our students home with tasks to complete to bring back the next day.
Excellent. Thank you. And that concludes our opening statements. You've already given us lots to think about, from the reality of homework, the student skill building, to the equity issue and time and what is best spent time at home. So we're going to go into the question round here. Rob and I have a question or two to start us off, and then we're going to ask the audience if anyone wants to formulate a question. So start thinking about that right now. But my first question, and I had tweeted this out that we were doing this debate, and a lot of people wanted me to ask you all, what is the purpose of homework? So let me start with this side with Shelby and Rachel. Either one of you can take this. If we're giving homework, what is the purpose?
First of all, as teachers, we need to have a policy. Why are you assigning homework? And I would say that the purpose of homework is sometimes to help students practice on something that you taught them, or even continue to see where the math is out of the classroom. Think about your little kids. You're teaching them about different shapes. Homework can you go home and identify the different shapes that you can see? That is helping the students to really connect what they're learning to the outside world. If, for example, you're teaching high school students some statistics, it is an opportunity for them to go and collect data as a group and come and talk about you're building communication, you're building advocacy, you're building awareness. So homework, I would say, is not just assigning 10 problems that are the same. You have to have a policy. You have to have a purpose. And you need to think about if, for example, I'm going to prepare my students to start thinking about what I'm teaching tomorrow. What can I tell them to go and find out? So we start a conversation that is helpful for them. So I would say that is why I think, that is the purpose of homework.
Yes, thank you. And let me jump to the other side. So I know you don't want us to give homework, but if you see someone giving homework, what do you see as the purpose behind that?
So I would agree with our opponents here that those are absolutely the purposes of homework. My issue is more with the definitions that we are using here. So our esteemed colleagues on the opposite table use the phrase that homework shows students that learning can occur at home. And I would absolutely agree with that. Homework, however, forces it into the venue of academic learning can occur at home. Whereas I would argue that anything that students do to exist in the world is learning. Along those same lines, allowing students to see math outside of the classroom is an incredibly important thing that needs to happen, right? That is ultimately the goal of our class, is for students to be able to see that math. However, if we are covering these topics well and efficiently in our class, our students will see the math outside of our classroom without us assigning them to do so, which is ultimately what we want. Finally, the statement was made that one of the other purposes of homework was to help develop study habits. But again, I would claim that developing those study habits is predicated based on the situation in which each individual student finds themselves. The study habits that are necessary for one student to succeed are going to be drastically different than the ones necessary for others to succeed. And the environments and support systems in which they find themselves are drastically different and require different kinds of habits.
Shelby, you want to respond to that?
So one of the things that my esteemed colleague across the table,
marriage spat.
this is the first time he's been polite to me all week, and now I'm esteemed colleague.
We have an audience.
One of the things that I am concerned about is this idea that assigning homework is equivalent to mandatory homework or graded homework. And I don't necessarily agree with either of those things. I also don't agree with homework being assigned at every grade level. I do think that young children should have the opportunity to just exist in the world with their parents or families or guardians, that they should have an opportunity to explore without being required to turn something in to prove that they have done something outside of the classroom. But as students get older, I think providing them with opportunities and keeping those opportunities short and sweet and to the point are very valuable. Several years ago, I heard someone speaking and saying, if a student can do 5 problems, they're going to be frustrated at being asked to do 50. If they can't do 5 problems, they're going to be frustrated being asked to do 50. So like I mentioned in my opening statement, homework doesn't have to be what we experienced as homework. It doesn't have to exist in this plane of, I am giving you hours and hours of things to do on your own. Ha ha, good luck, sucker. We can reimagine what homework exists as.
Can I add 10 seconds
Go
to
ahead.
that? I push back only because
even if homework is 5 minutes, that's 5 minutes that I could have taken. And as a parent, I'm coming from a parental point of view here. That's 5 minutes that we could have spent getting ready to cook together, where I'm going to use math. That's 5 minutes that I could have used to talk to my son about what's going on in the world or what happened with his friends at school or whatever. Outside of the 8 hours that he just talked to his teachers. And I have like 4 hours to be with him after school. And that doesn't account for extracurriculars. So yeah, I just needed to add that. 5 minutes is too long.
Well, and so I've heard teachers say that, but homework helps teach responsibility also. So I'm going to go to Justin and Crystal. I've heard this. So Justin and Crystal, how would you respond to somebody that says, like, well, we're trying to teach students responsibility, like they're giving a task and they have to bring it back. It's their responsibility to do so. Your thoughts?
I can start with that. Yep. So if one thing, if I didn't learn anything else from the last couple of years, I learned that the responsibility should never be on students. Adults a lot of times take a back seat and put the responsibility on students because it's uncomfortable for us. So let me give an example. So when we were, lots of us were teaching virtually, right? And if a student didn't do something or they didn't log on, we marked them as absent. We marked the assignment as not being turned in. I have 2 studies that I want to talk about. One study was from the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. And they found that almost 97% of students across the country needed to use internet for homework, and they still do post-pandemic because it was something that teachers continued to do. And more than half of those students said that at one time or another, their internet was unstable, they didn't have access, all of that, right? Another study concluded that homework increases social inequities because it potentially serves as a mechanism to further advantage the already advantaged and to continue disadvantaging those that are already in the margins, right? So I know we keep talking about equity on this side, but that's what it comes down to, y'all. It's about, do I have the supports at home in order to foster what's called good study habits? And I push against that because that's all based on normative data, right? And we know that normative data is based on European Western ideals, and that does not take in ways of knowing of every single student that is in our classroom. So I would push back to say, cooking with my family, if we're into quilting, I'm working at my family's restaurant. I'm thinking of my own students. These are not things that I'm just coming arbitrarily from. Those are all learning experiences, and I would not call that homework. I would call that life and love work.
Rachel or Shelby, you want to respond?
So in my opening statement, I talked about the fact that we need to know who our students are. Knowing students is not just knowing that they can be able to do the work that I'm assigning, but knowing them and knowing what is possibly where they come from. And so when we're assigning homework, one of the things that I have read about is giving students choice. And so when we are preparing homework as teachers, it is important for us to look at what can be a range of homework that the kids can choose from and do something, and I know that they're going to be able to learn despite the situation that they are in. Now, my esteemed colleague talked about equity, and I would push that equity is also knowing your students and believing in them and building skills that are lifelong. And that means that we want them to learn how to be responsible. Remember that we want our children to be able to be well prepared for college behavior. And that is doing work on your own, doing work with your colleagues, and coming back and talking about what you've done. Now, if at the end of these school years, we are not assigning homework because we are looking at their environments and saying that probably the home environment is not allowing them to be able to accomplish what we've assigned. Then how are they going to transition to be independent learners when they're out of school, in college, preparing for their careers? These are skills that we need to foster early. As I told you, I come from a different country, my formative years. And I had a student who one day at 8 p.m, I was still in the school building, and I saw one of the lights still on in the classroom. And as I was leaving, I passed and I peeped, and I saw the student huddled and doing work. And I opened the door and I asked, "Why aren't you going home? It's late. It's not safe." And this student told me, "Where I am, we have a small house, 8 children, 1 bedroom, and there's no electricity. I want to finish my work so that when I go home, I'm going to be able to connect and sleep and be ready for school tomorrow." So this particular child understands where she's coming from. She has built ways in which she can go around her situation. For me, that is building responsibility. Okay? Even with our children, let us know them and assign homework that we know they can accomplish.
So now we are going to take some questions from the audience for our esteemed colleagues. Are there any questions that anybody would like to ask them?
You started something.
And say your name and your question.
Hi, I'm Aria Fradkin. I have a question about this equity issue. It feels to me like the actual issue with equity is a larger community systemic issue. It's not about homework. And practicing is a good idea, right? So I'm kind of wondering about this argument because building skills for the future is separate from whether you obligate homework, right? So I'm kind of curious from both sides about that distinction. I mean, I understand that if you're telling kids you got to do homework and I'm going to grade you on it, and I'm going to basically punish you for not having internet, that's a different problem. But if we're talking about giving kids the opportunity to practice skills, which we know in the real world, that's how you separate yourself is taking initiative. Then is it a taking initiative conversation or is it an obligation conversation? I'm wondering from your guys' perspective, how do you distinguish that? How does that matter in terms of when you assign things?
Thank you very much. It's an excellent question. Couple of points I want to hit with that. First being, yes, practice is incredibly important. It is vital to having a solid understanding of the underlying concepts. However, if we are requiring or necessitating that practice to happen outside of the supportive environment that we are able to create, we are already creating a division between the students who have a supportive environment and are able to practice successfully and those who say, I don't know, I'll pull this out of the air, need to stay until 8 p.m. at their school because that's the only place that they have available to do that practice. Those are very different situations, and regardless of whether or not they need the practice, one of those students is already advantaged over the other. Additionally, where our opponents mentioned the idea of choice homework, providing that idea for students, absolutely, as long as there is also a non-consequential way to decline, either because, again, that is the choice that they are making, and regardless of what we may believe, we are not their bosses, right? They are not our employees. They come to us and we try to provide them with this service to help them move along their own journey, not our journey. But if we are able to provide a non-consequential way for them not to do or to decline or to opt out, there still is going to be creating that division between the students who opt in and the students who opt out, regardless of the reason. It could be intentional. It could be that choice of, well, I just don't want to do this versus the only way I can do this is if I stay at my school building until 8 o'clock at night. And forcing students to make that choice is deeply inequitable.
And I do want to add to that really quickly. Our students are all brilliant, and they have the ability to practice alone. I really, truly believe that. And I don't believe that our students go home to nothing. I believe that we have rich family relationships. I believe they have support. But when's the last time, put on your parent hat with the non-mathematical educator hat and think about the new math. I can tell you right now, I teach middle school. When my son was in 3rd grade, I called my colleagues like crazy. Like, how do you do this? I've never even seen this before. So we'd spend time doing homework because I was also relearning. Is that good for the parent? Absolutely it is. But again, I go back to, we're taking away vital time during the formative years for family relationships to flourish outside of obligation.
And to the other side, do you want to respond to that question?
Yes. So one of the things that our opposition brought up was this idea of opt-in versus opt-out and how that advantages and disadvantages students. But homework seems to be the only place where we really focus in on that. If a student chooses to opt in versus opt out of, say, their classwork assignments, we don't say that they can opt out of their classroom assignments, and that's not equitable. We also notice that when students have the opportunities to practice on their own in order to have their ideas around the math, what I would do in my classroom is I would give students a choice. And that choice was to complete the assignment. But what I don't want you to do is banging your head against the wall for hours against a problem that's impossible for you. So your homework assignment changed to write down a question that you can ask me about tomorrow in order to help you complete this assignment. Because what I didn't want happening is I didn't want that tension and that friction happening between a parent and a child, between a guardian and a child. Because that parent, that guardian is done with school. They're not in my class. They're not my student. They're not required to do the learning that is happening in that grade year. And so what I want is for parents to say, hey, what's going on with this problem? How can I help you write a question? Not how can I help you do this math? Not how can I teach you this math? Because that's not their job. That's my job. What I want them to do is to be a partner with me of, when you're not sure what to do, how do we figure this out? How do we go and find those resources? And so the assignment would shift into, what are the things that I need to do? What are the steps that I need to take in order to be successful on a problem like this or on a topic like this? And that comes part and parcel with this idea of re-envisioning what homework can and should be.
Our next question from the audience.
Hi there. My question comes from the lens of being a high school teacher. And so I do agree that this question potentially is slightly varied, whether you're thinking elementary age, middle school, or high school. But just know that this question is coming from the lens of a high school teacher. So this is, I guess, more for the con side. So saying that homework can widen the gap or equity gap, I actually feel that it can actually reduce that equity gap. And so at one point, I taught pre-algebra to 9th and 10th grade students, and I assigned homework almost on a daily basis, but we would roll a die to decide if it was going to be collected on a particular day. Odds we collected, evens we don't. And sometimes the students would roll the die and it would say, don't collect, and they would beg me to collect their homework. And I'd say, well, why is that? And they said, well, you are the only one that has that expectation that we do homework. All the other people have lowered their expectations for us. And so by raising the expectations for our students, aren't we in essence closing that equity gap?
I love the question. And, to think about that, I think we have to ask, that's a very loaded question, and we have to think about a few things, right? So if I am a high school teacher, and research shows that high school and there is no correlation between those that assign homework and do homework and grades achievement, right? There are plenty of studies out there that will show you that there is no correlation to achievement based on NAEP data, right? So students that reported having homework, even in high school, still did not have a significant difference in their NAEP data than the ones that did not do homework. So when you're thinking equity, I don't think homework constitutes expectation. Expectation happens when they're in the classroom with you for the 8 hours a day, right? So maybe that's your 60-minute bell, your 45-minute bell, whatever bell hour or whatever you have, that expectation goes there. They know that I didn't assign homework after my first year of school, second year teaching, right? Because I noticed that if I'm assigning homework, as meaningful as it is, I've tried projects, I've done all different types of homework, right? And I've noticed that the equitable differences, I've had parents call and say, why are you assigning homework to my student when they get out of school at almost 4 o'clock and they go to bed by 8:30? And these were 8th graders, which some would consider high schoolers. I know that they're in our high schools in Cincinnati. So while practice is important, and it's important for students to really be able to understand that whatever expectation, and our colleagues said about policy, right? It definitely depends on the policies that you set, but it doesn't negate the fact that homework is impeding on the time that they have outside of school. And that's an equity issue. Like, don't we want our students to have rich, nice, great, solid relationships with their families and with their communities? When are they supposed to build that? When they're taking out time to do more of what they did during the day? I can't get past that part. That's equity to me. I want everybody to have family time. But yeah, research shows that it does not correlate to NAEP data. So I would actually argue that we're talking about homework, and that homework should be done at home. I don't actually think homework needs to be done at home. I think that, like you said, we have 7 to 8 hours during the day. Why are we not building time into our school day for something like a study hall? Because homework really could be just independent practice, or practice that's not done in the eyes of the teacher. Because that's ultimately what I want to have happen, is I would have students who were with me all class long. They were following me. They got it. A few hours had passed, and then suddenly it was like I had never taught them anything. And what they were finding is that the students would come to me and saying, I know that we did this yesterday. I knew how to do this yesterday. It's today. I don't remember what to do. And as they started to do that independent practice outside of that 1 hour that we had together, those skills got stronger. And if we're calling it homework, it does carry that connotation of work to do at home. Maybe we need to redefine the word itself and find a new word besides homework, because really what we're advocating for is independent practice that's not done inside of that class time. Independent practice is actually the larger part of any good curriculum. So independent practice should be happening in the classroom during a lesson, right? And I think we're actually saying the same thing, that we need to be able to stop following pacing guides and being surveilled by admin and district, and let us, if it takes us 2 to 3 days to get through a lesson, let's do it. Let's go deep and not wide. So it's not homework if it's not done at home. If it's done at school, it's called independent practice at school.
Okay, I don't want to get into the definition of homework at this, or how picky we're on the word. I want to go one more audience question here.
Hello, my name's Matt McLaughlin. I have a couple, I know when you're talking homework, you're talking practice, and you're talking practice of skills that were just taught. What if we turned the homework on its head, and instead of doing skills that were just taught, use the interleaved practice model, where we're giving them skills that they've mastered that their parents do not need to help them with, and give them that as homework rather than give them the stuff that we need to be there and guiding them in their practice.
Thank you very much. So it sounds to me, and I may have definitions a little off, it sounds like you're sort of talking about a flipped classroom model. So rather than instruction, so practice ahead of what we're looking at.
No, practice on mastered skills.
Oh, spiral. Okay, so we're still talking about digging into their time outside of the classroom and outside of the school day in order to practice anything. And so while there may be some benefits to that, none of those really address that underlying issue of the students who have a supportive and available environment to complete these tasks versus those who don't. I don't believe we're arguing the merits of, although we sort of are arguing some of the merits of homework itself, as much as the importance of having that difference between the things that they complete in school and the lives that they live outside of our rooms. I would absolutely agree with our colleagues at the other table that that independent practice is incredibly important. But it sounds very much as though what you're talking about is not so much a homework issue as much as a scheduling issue. And those are things that need to, I agree, be completely built in to our schedule with whatever schedule changes need to happen, block scheduling, study halls, all of that. Yeah, practice needs to happen. We are not arguing against that point. Our point is that there is not an equitable way to have the outside of school work being done in a fashion that allows all students to access that equally. And that's where the inequities and that's where the problems come into place. Not so much the substance as much as the actual time.
Thank you. And in the interest of time, that will conclude our questioning round. Thank you, audience, for your questions. We're going to pause for 1 minute here, just 1 minute to give each team a chance to organize their thoughts before they share their closing statements with you. Take a moment right now, talk to your neighbor. What arguments have you heard so far that really resonated with you or made you think? All right, and here we go with our final round closing statements.
And we are going to begin with the pro side with Dr. Rachel Ayeko. Go ahead, Rachel.
Now, as we recovered from the pandemic, we all realized how challenging teaching was during the time our students were online and when they returned to school. Perhaps, if we had all taken time to reflect on the importance of assigning homework, it would have helped us transition to online learning more manageable. The questions that I want to leave for our teachers is, what is the content of the homework that you assign your students? What is the quality of the homework versus what is the quantity? Research shows that shorter homeworks are more effective if you are able to organize it with a difficult and an easy problem. Research shows that that helps the students to continue their learning and improves achievement. Teachers, what is the purpose of the homework? What do you do with the homework that you assign students? Do you grade it for accuracy, for neatness, for completion? How many of the students do you examine? How efficient are you at checking homework? My student teachers tell me that they noticed that the teacher never checked the homework that they did. And so what they would do is scribble something and the teacher just comes and stamps. But they were not really doing anything. Our kids know the policies that you have for homework. So what I'm leaving with you, fellow teachers, when you have high expectations for your students, it means that when you assign them work to do, they know that you are expecting them to have something in return. That, to me, is equity. Thank you.
Thank you. And with the final word from our opposing side, we have Crystal Watson.
I'll be quick here. We talk about educating the whole child, but we forget the whole child once they leave our doors. Research, a recent research project that was done out of Stanford showed that 56% of students considered homework as a primary source of stress in their lives, according to direct student survey data. 43% viewed tests as a primary stressor. So that means that tests are less stressful than homework. It showed that there were reductions in health. In their open-ended answers, students said that their homework load led to sleep deprivation and other health problems. It gave them less time for friends, family, and extracurricular pursuits. We talk about sports and things like that that help them understand how to socialize with peers and get along with folks with opposing views and things like that. When will we put more time and effort into encouraging outside of the normal schooling structure for students to have to develop themselves? We are not their only support. We are not responsible for every single thing that a child learns and does in their lifetimes. If we do, that's why we're burnt out. We're trying to be everything for every child. So in consideration of teaching and considering the whole child, let's do that past our doors in which they walk in and out of.
Thank you. And that concludes our debate. Thank you to both sides. You've given us so much to think about. And now we want to ask our audience to cast a second and final vote. Take a moment to ponder the arguments. Decide, do you still stick with the same side, or has your vote changed? And as you're casting that final vote, we want to thank all four of our guests for so bravely getting up in front of all of you and debating this hot topic, doing it respectfully, professionally, so thoughtfully. You have modeled what good quality debate can be, how we can disagree and lean into areas of both agreement and disagreement. Thank you all. Let's give them a round of applause.
Can we also give a round of applause to Chris and Rob for facilitating this and pulling this off this morning?
And like all of our debates, for those of you who listen and are listening at home, hopefully this will be our November episode. For those that are listening and for all of you, we encourage you to consider and continue this conversation outside of this space within other people that you see on your ride home. Think about it and really, continue this conversation.
And if you want to be in a future debate, go to debatemath.com and sign up to be one of our future guests for future episodes. As we wrap up, though, I want to give a chance for our panelists here to share where we can find them. So, Shelby, where can listeners and audience people find you?
So in true Twitter loudmouth fashion, you can find me at Snuffleupagus, which is Snuffleupagus, but with an E. Or if you want me to pretend to be an adult, you can also find me at Stronger Math on Twitter or strongermath.com. Oh, you should also join us for the Math Routine Collaborative every Thursday at 8:30 Eastern. strongermath.com/MRC.
Thank you. And Rachel?
Wow. I am not that so much in social media, but you can find me on ayekor@duq.edu, or I do have a Twitter handle. If you just put Rachel Ayeko, I should be able to pop up. I'm trying to be active, but I'm not there yet.
You can do it.
We'll connect all of you on Twitter as well. Make it clear for everyone.
I can be found either on Twitter at Justin Ian or Crying in a Dark Corner.
Thank you, Justin. And Crystal?
You can find me on Twitter at _Crystal M. Watson or on my website at crystalmwatson.com. Either way is fine. Email me, tweet me, all of those good things. I love a good conversation.
Okay, and as we wrap up, Rob's just pulling up our results. So I just want to share with you how this went. So at the very first vote, the pro side, you had 78% of the votes, and now you've gone down to 64%. So the other side has swayed some people. They went from 23% to 36% of the vote. We have had some shift, though this audience still feels very much like their math should have homework. Again, thank you all. Thank you to our guests. Thank you for everyone for this experiment with us.
Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Well, that's it. Thank you all for sharing in our very first live debate with us.
Want to bring a live debate to your conference? Contact us at debatemath.com.
Or on Twitter at DebateMathPod. Want to learn more about incorporating debate activities into your math classroom? Go to luzniak.com/podcast to sign up for my mailing list and get your first set of example debate activities you could use with your students today. Go to luzniak.com/podcast.
Don't forget to reach out to us with comments and questions on debatemath.com or follow us on Twitter @debatemathpod and follow along with #debatemathpod.
Rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts.
Or wherever you listen to this podcast. Your feedback is super important to us.
Well, that's all from us.
Looking forward to debating with you more next episode. Until next time, cheers.